For those of you who don't know PWN Barcelona, we are a non-profit organization focused on accelerating the agenda of diversity and gender balance in leadership, and we are an international organization. We typically have our events in person. This particular event was due to be scheduled just after International Women's Day, but because of the recent changes in conditions for us all, we decided to move forward in the spirit of innovation and bring this event online and tonight. So the agenda for our event, or the topic rather, is engaging men, a win-win for diversity. And in our experience, we've seen mounting evidence that men have an incredibly valuable role to play in ensuring that we build a world where gender diversity is a real possibility for all leadership teams globally, and they are leading the way in creating change and developing and delivering policies that leadership teams need. And of course, that means bringing a lot of women on board. And although in our events we hear from many women, tonight we thought we'd invite a male leader who works in Barcelona to talk to us about his experience of diversity and gender balance in leadership. So we are going to structure this evening with having a 20-minute discussion with our guest tonight, and then we'll have a 10-minute Q&A. So when you think of a question that you'd like to ask our guest, feel free to type it into the comment box, and we will hopefully get to your questions towards the end of the event. So without further ado, why don't you introduce yourself to us, David?
Okay, so good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining. A little bit belated. Technology has not been on our side this week, for sure. But yeah, my name's Dave Kirby. You'll quickly notice, although I'm resident in Barcelona, I'm not naturally from here. Originally, I'm from Oxford in England, where I both studied and started my early career. My first early career was in engineering. Originally, I kind of thought about describing it as male-dominated, but it for sure kind of male monopolized back kind of 20 years ago when I was working in engineering. I worked through engineering projects and ultimately into leadership roles. And through that whole time, I was blindly unaware of gender balance. Let me just close this. Gender balance and my own unconscious bias. Back in about 2012, I started to study for my exec MBA, and that was the first time really that I probably started to think quite differently and think about leadership and think about the teams that I either reside in or the teams which I lead. On conclusion of the MBA, I looked for an organisation that was more diverse than a classic engineering organisation, which isn't difficult to find for sure. And that's when I joined ADP. ADP is my current employer, and it employs 60,000 people globally. It delivers human capital management, so kind of HR software systems and payroll and kind of classic things that we all need. And through its very nature, it does have a hugely diverse mix across that 60,000. So again, it's an interesting organisation for me. In 2017, after being in ADP in London office for about 4 years, I was promoted to Vice President of Global Implementation, and that's where ADP asked me to move to this great city of Barcelona, which is why I'm here today. Although I guess I could be anywhere on the video. With the full support of my wife, Liz, and our 3 children, who I'm fingers crossed will not come in during this conference call because they've been in earlier for some others. So I have 3 children. They're 7, 9, and 11, so easy for me to remember. Billy, Arthur, and Sebastian. We moved in 2018, and that's a big ask for a family to move. It's a big ask for my wife to leave behind her network. It's a big ask for my children to leave behind their families, but it had the full support. It has the full support of the family, and in particular Liz, who keeps us all together. And I think she has the most difficult job out there, trying to keep the 3 children out of this room at the moment. But like I say, that's where I am. That's why I'm here, and I'm super grateful to be here tonight. And hopefully we can have some good discussion.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David. So first of all, a very generic question to kick us off, I guess, is what are your current thoughts and ideas around gender equality and gender balance in leadership?
Okay, thank you. So having worked in non-diverse teams and having worked in diverse teams, for me, diversity in any form, and obviously today, we're talking predominantly around gender balance, but diversity in any form is critical in any high-performing team. It's critical to bring different perspectives and share those ideas and those experiences, and those experiences that you can only get through diversity. From a business perspective, it offers, from a business perspective, and I'll come on to the social perspective in a second to show that I'm not just some crazy business leader, but from a business perspective, our clients, our customers show strong diversity. You can sell your products and services to a very diverse range of people. So without matching, or better still, showing greater diversity, through large organizations and large corporations, which sometimes is difficult because with 70 years in the making, people have kind of trickled to the top of the tree, and often, the men have trickled to the top of the tree more, in the kind of the more less recent times. So, and if I think, a kind of real example that I faced, and I will say it was not when I was working for ADP, but I was involved in a tender, so bidding for some work. It was in London. And I went, and there was a hugely diverse team working on the tender, hugely diverse. So probably, lots of people from because it was a very diverse bid. And we went to pitch the bid. 5 of us, I think it's 4 or 5 of us, went to pitch the bid. The number's less important. And we had very strong words in our corporate brochures, very strong words in our tenders around, we're a greatly diverse company, and, we support gender diversity, we support all of the kind of the words were there. And we went to present to a very big bank in Canary Wharf in London, and the first thing somebody said to us as the 5 of us walked in, thank you very much for coming today. You talk in your RFP about having great gender diversity. Why have you brought 5 middle-aged men in blue suits? And this is a real story. And
Wow.
And we did not win that bid, but the reality was we 5 middle-aged men in blue suits, thought that the right thing to do was to take 5 middle-aged men in blue suits. And this was a long time ago, but for me, it really kind of stuck. It's an old story, but for me, it's something that I kind of remember quite critically. And again, it's what the message there is. You can say it in your brochures, you can say it in your recruitment, but if you don't kind of walk the walk, then it kind of means nothing. And none of us did it deliberately. None of us thought this is the right thing to do. It's just, I think it was just those unconscious bias just drifting in without thinking. And then if I think about kind of socially, rather than from an economic standpoint, obviously losing the bid was a bit of a shock. But if I think about socially, and again, I think back, I will totally give away my age, but if I think back 47 years, my mother was super bright and super engaged in one of her careers, but 47 years ago she stopped working in the organization she was in to kind of bring up me, and then ultimately my sister and my brother. But she never went back to the career that she could have had. And whether this is the right thing to say or not, if you compare my father and my mother, they always say that I got my brains from my mother. So let's not go into that anymore. But I think when I think back 47 years ago, it wasn't a choice. It wasn't a choice to say, should mum or dad work? It was just, it just happened that way. And if I think back, I'm sure we as a family would be a lot better off if my dad would have stopped working and my mum would have carried on. But that's kind of, for me, things have changed. 47 years is a long time, but it's so important to see how far we've come, but equally see how much further we can go.
For sure. And I think what you said there about the role of your mum and your dad when you were growing up, a lot of us will relate to that. I certainly do. My dad passed many years ago now, but we had a very traditional family. He was the main breadwinner, but my mom had equal intelligence, and I don't think she even realized she had the choice of being the breadwinner if she was aware of that, and how different would my life have been if my mom was also taking a lead role at home. I want to touch on one thing that you said earlier about when you talked about the bid and the all male team, and how, you know, your brochures can talk about gender balance and how focused you are on diversity, but if you don't walk the walk, then your brochures mean nothing.
Yeah.
So talk to us about the current male female split in the leadership team in ADP, so both the team that you're in as a VP and the team that you manage.
Okay, no, that's a good question, because, and again, it's a good question that does warrant a slightly more wordy answer, because I could say, you know, the ratio and deliver that. But if I look at 60,000 people in ADP, our managers and above, about 45% of the managers and above across 60,000 people are female. So that, in the headline, sounds, I won't say it sounds good because it's not 50, but it sounds positive versus what you said earlier, that only 20%. But actually, when you dig under the numbers, and ADP has some fantastically good intentions, and in the last 3 to 5 years we've seen some good progress there. But when I look at the ADP board, so the board of directors on ADP, just 20% of those are women. So, you know, 2 from 10 are women. And if I take the next level down, which is like the executive committee, things slightly improve, but things still go nowhere towards that 45% number. And at the executive committee level is 25%. So what this is telling me, and what's telling, you know, our analysts in ADP, is that we have lots of female managers, and we have managers of what we would call an individual contributor, but we have less female leaders of leaders. So I now will ask the specific answer, the question that you asked, because I'm super proud about it. So in the team that I am part of, so the departmental leadership of the global payroll team, it's a 40-60 split from a female male ratio, again, which is good. But the team that I lead, I help the numbers perhaps, but I have just one man and 6 women working directly for me, and I don't feel that this is you know, a non-diverse team because of this reasons, and I'm not so brave as to think why I don't think it's a non-diverse team. But again, it feels like, you know, it's a strong and it's a high performing team. I don't ever think, wow, I need 2 more women, or wow, I need 2 more men. It's just, it works well. But my point is, you know, 1 in 5 skews the numbers on that 45% number at the top, at the headline.
So when you talked about the severe lack of diversity in the board at ADP, those numbers that you actually stated are not numbers that surprise me, because at the PWN we work with a lot of companies, or we at least talk to them, and they share the challenges that you have with gender diversity at the top. So you'll have entry level up to middle management. The gender split is more or less 50-50, if not 40-60, but the higher you go, the fewer women you have. So what's being done at ADP to address that lack of balance? Okay,
no, that's a good question, and a lot is being done at ADP to address the balance. So we have a very, very strong women's inclusion network, international women's inclusion network. IWIN, everything at ADP has to be an acronym. So we have a very strong network, and the one thing that I think why this network is such a success is, you know, it's been built and then people have chosen to join it. And there are, you know, no surprise, more about 80% of the members of IWIN are female, but 20% of the members of IWIN are female. And IWIN is across the 125 countries that ADP is in. It's across the 60,000 people. And across, it's all the way from, you know, from the top to the bottom. You mentioned entry level; it would have people just join in, and it also has, of the 10 people on ADP's board, all of them are members of IWIN, and all of them will actively participate and support the activities. And the key, I think, the things that work the best are those kind of local chapters. And the president of the Barcelona IWIN, Cindy Jansen, I think she presented to this group, you know, in certainly one of the past meetings, and one of the local things that happen is around just showing role models. So showing other women in the organization that it's fine to go home and do what you need to do. It's fine to show flexibility. It's fine and how you can be successful in that next level of leadership. Because one of the things that I've probably heard more than once, but again, each time I hear it is fascinating, is this kind of concept that, a man looks at a job description and sees two things that he can do. So he thinks, I'm ready for the job. And the woman has to see, 90% of the things. She has to be very confident before she's even willing to put her hand up to be ready for the role. So, so how are we helping that ADP? We're having a mentorship and the sponsorship program, and those two kind of roles are very different. To help women, and the mentors and the sponsors are both male and female. So that's something that I think we've tried both sides, but really to support women to convince and to help them be confident to go for the roles that the men are going for, because it is super important. Because without a balance, and my president, so the leader of the European, the international piece, he will not start the interview process now until he has at least an equal mix of male and female candidates, which makes our talent acquisition team a little bit nervous, because it's quite a difficult thing to do sometimes for certain roles. So I think for me, it's really helpful, that we have these mentor programs and we have a really strong recruitment approach. And one of the other things that I know many have felt uncomfortable, many middle-aged men in blue suits have felt uncomfortable, is that we've gone through some quite rigorous focus around unconscious bias, and many eyes have been opened to how you think. To your point, Razwana, you talked about you grew up in a traditional family and the dad was the breadwinner, and I think these things, these things stay with you for a long time, and until you can kind of uncode and recode, I think it's quite a difficult thing to work through.
In ways that you don't realize, I think, as well. Often if I have felt excluded from a team, I've worked in IT for the majority of my career, so I've worked in very male-dominated teams. The last thing I put it down to was gender. But now that I'm in this field and I'm learning about other women's experiences, I can see that actually sometimes that exclusion was down to gender and the old boys club and that kind of thing. Yeah. So I think it's true, the stuff stays with you, and it's often very difficult to define specifically why your gender is an issue, as it were. Yeah. So thanks for sharing what ADP are doing to redress the balance of gender in the leadership team. So why do you think it is that women find it difficult to break that ceiling, as it were? What do you think it is that's different in the experience of a man that a woman may not necessarily do? You mentioned the thing around reading a job description, and a woman, typically women will say, I need to be 100% ticking all the boxes before I move forward with the application. So what else do you think that they do that men typically don't?
So I think, one of the things, if I think about that's a recruitment process, whether that's external or internal to kind of gain promotion, I think that people put a lot of weight in CVs, and CVs, if I think about when I was taught to do a CV, it was all about don't show any breaks, don't show any gaps between job A and job B. So you had to show a continuous flow of project engineer, project manager, program manager, and as long as there's no gaps, that's a good CV. And I think that these things flow through, because if you take a woman that's had 1, 2, or 3, I advise against 3, but 1, 2, or 3 children, there's going to be breaks naturally. The man can't do that bit, so there will be breaks, there can be breaks, and those breaks can and should be, people have different views, but they can be 1 year, 2 years, and I think that those things flow through in the CV, and those things flow through in that kind of unconscious bias. But I think also in the candidate as well, almost a little bit embarrassed. And I've seen people be embarrassed and almost apologize for, I took 6 months off, but but I'm over that now, rather than, I did a super positive thing. My child I bonded all of the kind of the positives that come with these approaches. So I think it's hard to instill self-confidence if you've spent your time being pushed back for those reasons. But I think it's, I feel a man would like wash over those things, or kind of, it would be a positive somehow, rather than apologizing for something that, let's be honest, if women didn't do, then none of us would be here. So I think it's quite important.
Absolutely. And actually, we were due to have another speaker, Zara Jan Mohammed, with us tonight, but she wasn't able to make it. And she has an excellent story that's incredibly inspiring when it comes to women in jobs, or even looking for a change in career or a promotion whilst being pregnant. So I'm going to leave it on a cliffhanger there, because we're going to have a podcast interview with Zara coming up in the next couple of weeks. Though I think for those women that consider, when I have children, will it set me back in my career? Something I'm thinking about now, or have for a while, she has an answer that I think is going to inspire many women. But I think, gaps on CVs, unless, unless they are, used in or presented in like, I use my time efficiently. I took time off for a sabbatical. I went traveling. I tried building different experiences. Somehow having children doesn't carry the equal weight, and it needs to, because it's part and parcel of life. So let's have one final question from me, and then we'll move on to questions from the audience. So what do you think women can do to encourage the engagement of men in their leadership teams?
Okay, I'm glad I've got this question rather than the pregnancy application question, so that's good. So the question is, how can women engage men to help resolve the problem? I think men will never fully understand some physical facts of life, giving birth and all of these things. It will never understand this physical or emotional feeling. But it doesn't mean that that the men. I think most men are trying. Maybe people will sniggle when I say this is a very classic English saying, but most men are trying. And no, I don't feel that men are deliberately trying to block. I think it's the unconscious bias is an eye opener for everybody. And I think even if you go through it a year later, it's an eye opener. So you have to the men and the organization has to gain awareness and try to better appreciate how others are feeling, and how things that you will never experience. I will never experience going to the moon, but I can appreciate it will be quite an experience. But those kind of things around just understanding the challenges that are faced. And again, it's fine and being consistent. So allowing leaders to be consistent, because I've seen and heard examples where if I give feedback to a man and I'm about to tell him he's not done a great job, I'm just going to tell him he's not done a great job. But then you hear these stories where you're going to give that same feedback to a woman, and you approach it very differently. You even use different voices, and in the extreme you may kind of push the tissue box closer, and you have to be consistent. So I think the consistency is is really important to just maintain the balance. And again, the women have to help the men to find the appreciation, and some things happen through 47 years of kind of coding and just put us right. And I think people are big enough now and realize the importance of this to be put right. And if we can kind of be we can be course adjusted, it's much better than allowing the man to go off in those crazy examples. So I think help us to help, and we can kind of work together, because I see we have to work together. And again, that kind of the flexibility afforded to all should be a flexibility afforded to all. If I have to go home, because I won't say one of my children's name in case one of them come in the room, but if I have to come home because little John has banged his head in the playground, then people should look at me in the same way as if a woman goes home. And right. Those kind of consistencies I think are important, because when little Johnny does bang his head in the playground, I would probably put money that more often than not it's not the dad that's going to the school. Right.
Yeah, and I'm hoping one of your kids isn't called Little John, because we'd have to.
No, otherwise they will come busting in. So I didn't mention any of their names.
Okay, so let's move on to some questions from the audience. I'm going to pick up my phone and have a look. So here's a question: has David encountered resistance to change from men, and what does he do or say to counter that?
Resistance to change. Okay. So have I encountered resistance to change from men? I think 5 years ago, yes, open resistance for this, and 5 years ago, or maybe even 10 years ago, it was a harder argument than it is today. I think that you would have 10 years ago men who would be sitting in their office, and you would see the classic, and again I hark back to my engineering days, but you kind of see the classic, the 50-year-old man has one office, the 40-year-old man has another office, the 30-year-old man has maybe a desk, and then maybe there might be one token in the office. But I think that I've seen resistance 10 years ago, and it's more difficult to push, but now you really can fight fire with fire, because nobody is going to stand up and openly say it. And if you see them subconsciously saying it, then you can course correct. So I think that kind of course correction is important, because I genuinely don't think that any of ADP's 60,000 associates, I don't think anyone there is waking up in the morning and thinking, must give a job to a man, must give a job to a woman. But in their coding, some of them have got more than 47 years coding, they've got that kind of, so you have to help them, you have to steer them and guide them. And I think there are small signs that kind of make us cringe a little bit, if there's things that can happen, and you just have to kind of point them out. And then someone might say, oh, the answer you want is, I never thought someone else would see it this way. And then hopefully they've listened and it's moved on.
Let's talk about that for a minute. Then, have you ever had an experience where you've had that? I never realised it was like that for a woman in business, Dave, in business.
Yeah, have I? Yeah, of course. Thanks. Have I had that? I don't know if I can recall personally. For me, I think that the kind of the open things that make some people kind of, again, I'm thinking back now, I'm certainly not thinking in my time at ADP, and I'm thinking a different time, but those kind of unnervy things where you find yourself in a meeting and there may be a balance, and for example, the refreshments come out, and you kind of see who's first to the refreshments. Oh, do you want a drink? And it just, those things for me, I find that a bit difficult, and I would always kind of push against those actions. And again, we all have a role to play to resolve those.
So what about your experience in terms of addressing attitudes towards gender bias? What have you done in terms of strategy or tactics to...
Okay. So I think one of the things that doesn't work, let's start with the negatives. One of the things that doesn't work is, I used to play rugby in England, and I love rugby, and there's nothing more than I'd love to just reminisce about my rugby days. But nobody is interested in sporting analogies, and even less so, nobody is interested in rugby analogies. So, my kind of, and I've used these, and this is something I've learned, but I've used these. Sporting analogies should be left for the sports field.
Yeah.
Leave them there, because people, you're making an assumption that they know one thing about what you're talking about, and often they don't. You might have one or two in the room that does. So sporting analogies don't work. Don't hark back to your kind of your passion, and my passion was certainly rugby. But what do I think has worked? I think what has worked is you have to maintain momentum, because we've all been in projects and initiatives where what's the next big thing? It's gender balance, and then you put a few posters up and you have a couple of meetings, and then nothing happens until the next year when ADP starts to measure again. So for me, it's momentum, it's visibility, it's kind of just building that momentum to just drive it home. So a cadence around meetings, but not meetings for the sake of meetings. This PWN network seems super. I think it's great that we've gone ahead today. Technology has kind of been good enough. So I think just maintaining the momentum and keeping the visibility and refreshing, and don't think that we must have a meeting every quarter because we must have a meeting, but just doing the things, bringing in. And one of the things that I had when I did my MBA, I met somebody who a woman leader in my MBA, and she's now a super close friend, but she She is now the CEO of the British Heart Foundation, which is for those who know the UK, it's one of the prestigious kind of NGOs. Heart Foundation, super important. But I asked her, again, it cost me dinner, I'm sure, but I asked her to come and present to the team in London in the UK, because she's a CEO. She's at the top. She's one of the 20%. So I asked her to share her stories, and she came with no PowerPoint. She just taught her story, and she shared, and people really, really listened. People really, really understood, some of the challenges, and I think that those sharing the stories, showing the role models, and and supporting the role models and celebrating the role models is one of the things that ADP has done recently, is kind of showcasing role models in women leadership. So and make a big thing of it, and make it as the kind of the norm.
Absolutely. So here's another question, which is, what are ADP doing to encourage women to apply for leadership roles?
Okay, so a couple of these things we've covered. So this kind of concept of, we will not interview until we have an equal mix of male and female applicants for the role. That's a directive to our talent acquisition team, I think, which is important. And then the other thing that we're doing is we can't do the decoding and the recoding of every woman in ADP to say, don't worry that you only know 2 of the things on the CV. That man next to you is going to apply. So because we can't do that, we're using our mentors, and we're using our mentors to coach, to help them be more confident and go in with a with a more to effectively give it a shot. Apply for a role that you previously may not have applied for. But also, we have sponsors, and the sponsors tend to be at a more senior level. That the sponsors now know a number of our high potential, and we have a nurturing of our high potential female leaders. So they will know, these are known to the executive committee, these are known to the local board. So we identify our top talent, our top female talent for the future, and we give them all the opportunity to present at the board. So they will come with a topic, sometimes of their choice, sometimes a topic not of their choice, and present at the board, so that we can get a kind of a regular flow of high potential female leaders in front of the 80% men that sit on the board. So I think that's super important. So those are the kind of the actions that we are taking. We measure ourselves. We are measured individually, departmental level, and then obviously the group level, and there's a target to propagate up the 50% that we see lower down as we move up into our kind of more senior grades.
Cool. And I think let's go to one last question now. So you've been in Barcelona for a few years. What have you noticed changing in terms of work culture when it comes to diversity, and I guess in our case specifically gender balance?
Okay, so Barcelona is. I come from a kind of a small village in the UK. So Barcelona is hugely diverse, and the variety that we see in Barcelona is much the same as in any big city, but I think more so than London. And again, I was a long way from London, so a long way away from diversity. So I think that flexible working is a really important for diversity, to allow people to balance life. And balance life is, it would be, if I was here with my 3 children and Mrs. Kirby decided she wasn't coming to Barcelona with me, it would still be feasible, but it would be pretty damn near impossible to manage the kind of balance if I didn't have kind of flexible working. And I see this, so I encourage people to make a big thing of leaving. Don't be, I'm the last in the office, look at me, I'm a hero. I love to say, I'm going home to watch my son Arthur watch football. He's terrible at football, but I watch him anyway. But I make a big thing on a Friday. I'm going home to watch my son be beaten 10-0 at football. But I go, and I think it's important to make those points, and it's important to go to the school concerts. Admittedly, they're virtual at the moment, but go to the school and make those be visible, that you're doing things that, hold on, why is dad going to the school concert? Make these things visible. I think that helps people, and it also helps. I said I had six women who would report directly into me, and one man, and I don't think any of them would feel funny about asking me if they could do something that they felt was was something related to the family or anything they needed to do. I think that's important.
Yeah, and actually, I think sometimes, whether this is reality or not, I don't know, but women can often feel like they're being judged for going home to do something with the kids, and men are celebrated. Like, isn't it sweet? He's a dad and he's going home to look after the kids. And I don't know how real that is, but I think in the women's minds, that's what they're sometimes thinking.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I sit in a group within the Barcelona office, and I would agree. Oh, what a great super dad or whatever. I've got my card here actually that my son. Can you see this? It says super dad. He did me a card today. Super dad. So there we go.
Is that Sonic?
Yeah, Sonic, super dad. Sonic, yes, he did this today. But no, I would agree. I think that is it super positive that dad's gone to watch the ballet concert, or is it super a drain that the mum's gone again to watch the ballet concert? I would agree. I think that, but I think you have to be visible to leave, visible to be late into the office, to do those things, because the businesses demand a lot from us, and the business can survive with somebody being out of the office for 3 hours to do something that you will never get the opportunity to do again. You will never get to see whatever it is you see. And I think if you miss those opportunities, I think life is wasted.
And I think in this time we're in now, businesses are really understanding how flexibly they can actually work, and how work and life is connected like this. No, it's really becoming quite apparent. So Dave, thank you very much for being our guest tonight. I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to what you've said, and I've been reading the comments, and my phone's been buzzing off the hook. It's not on a hook, but it's been buzzing anyway. With the fact that you've really delved into detail. You've been very open and honest. And at one point, I think it almost felt like an interrogation, maybe, because I was asking question after question. But I think you've really left us with some food for thought, but also some ideas that we can take back to our respective organizations. So thank you. So before we end the session, I know that we probably went live later than we thought we did. And we have recorded the entire presentation, so we'll be sharing it, fingers crossed, on social media soon. And as I hinted earlier, we have the female speaker, Razwana Mohammed, who was meant to join us tonight. We will be recording a podcast with us that will be released soon as well. So thank you, David. Thank you, audience, and have a great night.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.